Well, hello and welcome to the Midweek Blessing. I'm glad that you are back, or welcome if you're a first-time viewer. I'm Stephen Eastwood, and I hang out Facebook, YouTube, simplepastor.com. But I hang out also Wednesday evenings here, wherever that may be, and with you search for a blessing. So if you're here during the day, during the evening, midweek, weekend, just glad that you're here and that you can join me as we go through the Sermon on the Mount. I've been saying recently here that I think the Christian church would be quite different if we, instead of at the front of our churches, instead of having the Ten Commandments, we put up the Beatitudes. As Christians, instead of following the Ten Commandments first, the Beatitudes became our first reference point. Now, I know people, because I tried this in my churches over the years, and when I say something like this, all people hear is, he wants to get rid of the Ten Commandments, and that's not what I'm saying. But as Christians, I think the Beatitudes add something that would help us as a church, as an organization, as the witnesses of Jesus Christ, as an individual Christians. I just think it would help us. It is possible to follow the Ten Commandments and still be quite a mean person. You can not kill someone, but still seriously hurt them. And Jesus will address this. You've heard it said, but I say. And that sort of takes a lot of the law and puts some flesh and bones on it. And that's what I think the Sermon on the Mount does. So here we are hanging out in Matthew 5, 6, and 7 tonight. Matthew 5, verse 4. We are on the second Beatitude. And this one is going to come as, well, a little bit of a shock. It kind of stops us in our tracks a little bit. I've gone ahead of myself here, so let's take those off. I I'm not live, but I record live, so you get this mistakes and all. But here it comes. God blesses those who mourn. Now, that's not usually how we think of blessing. We tend to connect blessings with happiness and joy and a good week. You go to church, say, who's been blessed this week? Oh, me. My pet died. My 401k retirement plan tanked, and my marriage is on the rocks, and boy, it's just been a blessed week. It doesn't really work like that. Mourning feels heavy, painful, and unwelcome. So this sorts of jolts us. This is Beatitude number 2. Blessed are those who mourn. So imagine someone coming into church or experiencing God for the first time, and they're met with, blessed are those that mourn. We may not understand it right away, but I say, wait a second. When I am in grief and I am mourning, I certainly want to be comforted. And these are the words of Jesus here. So let's unpack them a little bit, because at first glance, mourning doesn't feel like a blessing. Grief feels heavy. Loss is disorientating. Am I saying that right? You know the word I mean, though, right? Sorrow can make us feel weak, vulnerable, fragile. It sort of undoes us, makes us feel open to pain and the world, and people's emotions tend to get at us much more easily than when we're not in mourning or grief. But in a world that tells us to stay positive, keep smiling, and move on quickly, sort of hide our grief, mourning can feel like something we ought to be hiding if we're going to be a proper person in our society. We mourn because things are not as they should be. If we have a things should be this way list. We mourn because relationships break. It's not just death. We mourn because our bodies fail. We mourn because injustice inflicts wounds. Not just injustice we experience, or certainly that, but also injustice that we witness. And we mourn because sin damages what God has made good. grief and mourning and loss make us remember this is not how God designed the world to be, but I am experiencing something as a created being by God that I perhaps wasn't really designed to experience. And I am suffering through this. And God says to those who mourn, you are blessed, for you will be comforted. So um, we just sort of put that out there. And I know it's hard because we probably all know somebody who's either grieving or has been through grief. And to go up to them and say you are blessed probably isn't good timing or good words to say in those moments. But these are the words of Jesus, and he has certainly put them out here. Now, I want to focus on the word will. It's a future tense, which suggests that the comforting may not happen in the moment. In fact, as we look through a lot of the Beatitudes in the next few weeks, a lot of, this is what you're going through now, but you're blessed because in the future, it's going to turn good. But grief itself, we experience because the future seems not okay anymore. So this word will is kind of essential to our understanding and our experience of blessing in the middle of grief or mourning. Let me put it this way. Back in Genesis 1, 2, and 3, at the very beginning of the Bible story, God is walking with Adam and says, eat from the tree of life, but don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because if you eat from the tree knowing good and evil, you'll die. Now, the story continues quite quickly at this point, and we realize that Eve and Adam both ate from the tree, but they did not, in that moment, they did not die. That day did not bring death, except for the animal that was killed to cover them with their skins. So, death wasn't completely felt in that moment. Death will happen, but it hasn't happened yet. And I wonder if we look at comforting in this beatitude in some of the same way. When you're in grief and you're mourning, there is a promise of comfort, but the comfort doesn't happen right now. Now, having said that, the moment that Adam and Eve ate that fruit, I think death started. They were on a track, and feelings were felt, and experiences were experienced, and we started to degrade, to put a word over a long span of time. And maybe comfort's like that. I think God does comfort us in the moment. I don't think we could survive without it, to be honest, because we were not created for this level of loss. But while comfort might start in the minute, we are not comforted for perhaps quite some time. There might be a lot more that needs to play out before we truly experience that full comfort. And so, like Adam and Eve experienced death, I think perhaps comfort is also experienced the same way over time. Adam and Eve lived for 900 years before they died. Maybe some of us are going to need to process and grieve for some time before we can easily say, I'm comforted. But the blessing still remains for those who mourn, for they will be comforted. And finally here, I want to remind us of the fact that God doesn't argue his point. He demonstrates his point. He doesn't argue who he is. He demonstrates who he is. So he doesn't come along and say, you're grieving now, get over it. You're going to be comforted. So, live for the future. And we're like, I don't feel confident. Yeah, but you will be. So if you just have faith, just have patience, just trust me already. No, this is not, God doesn't argue his point. He demonstrates it. And sometimes that demonstration certainly takes a little bit of time. In fact, as we go through the Sermon on the Mount, we're going to revisit this point quite regularly. God doesn't try and prove that he is loved by arguing his point. He proves that he is loved by demonstrating love. So with that, I want to go to another passage in the Bible. Oh, when I hit that button, my phone does something. I'm not sure why. It did it while I practiced. It did it just now. So I thought that was an anomaly. Oh, I'm doing lots of multi-syllable words that my brain's having a hard time to keep up with. But to demonstrate what I'm trying to share here, I want to go to John chapter 11, which is known for having the shortest verse in the Bible, which is Jesus wept. Unless, of course, a little bit of Bible trivia here for you. The shortest verse in the English language is from John 11 here, Jesus wept. But the shortest verse in Greek comes from 1 Thessalonians 5, rejoice always. Put those two verses together and you start to go like the rest of the Bible. But here we have a very well-known verse of Jesus weeping, and he does it in context of grief and comfort. So let's just take a look at this. Let me read this, John 11:33-36. When Jesus saw her weeping, this was Mary. He first of all met Martha when he first, remember this story? This is when Lazarus died. And he waited some days before he went. And so he didn't heal Lazarus of sickness. He ended up resurrecting Lazarus from the dead. And he was met there first by Martha. Martha came out to meet him. And Martha, we have in such short stories in the Bible, we have such a full, beautiful picture of the difference between Mary and Martha. And Martha's, the detailed, action-packed one, and she comes out, where were you? Why have you come now? But then he meets Mary, and Mary's crying. And when Jesus saw her weeping and saw the other people wailing with her, a deep anger welled up within him. And those of us who've studied grief, seen grief, experienced grief, know that there's definitely an anger element to grief. So when we say things like, if God really exists, why doesn't he get rid of all pain and suffering? Well, again, God is demonstrating, not arguing his point, and it's going to take some time to demonstrate this. That would be my short answer. But we also know from passages like this that God gets angry at hurt and pain and loss and sin. That anger is in him. A deep anger welled up within him, and he was deeply troubled. So what you're feeling, God knows that feeling because he's seeing the same stuff and more, and he feels it too. And could it be that God also needs comforting? I mean, he's feeling these feelings, suggests that there is some vulnerability to God as well. But feeling this, Jesus looking over the scene says, where have you put him? And they told him, Lord, come and see. And so Jesus went with them to see where they had buried Lazarus, into the tomb, the grave. And at this, the Bible says that Jesus wept. So I think Jesus experienced grief. Now, the first time I really experienced grief was at my grandfather's funeral, my dad's dad. And I didn't know my grandfather, paternal grandfather, very well. I only knew him in his Alzheimer's years. And so his loss was a moment, but I wasn't feeling it like everybody else. And I knew that. And I was okay with that. But when we got to the graveside and we had the graveside service and the loss becomes, very tangible, very real in that moment, my father cried. And when my father cried, that's when I cried because I was feeling his loss. And in that moment, I was imagining one day I'm going to lose my father as my father is now losing his father. And all these feelings and emotions came over me. And that was the first time I cried at a funeral. Might have been the first funeral I went to, actually. I'm not sure. I haven't checked the Stephen history books on that. But I imagine that a lot of Jesus' weeping here is because he is seeing other people's grief and relating that to his own grief, and his emotions came out. The people who were nearby said, "See how much he loved him." We get this sense that Jesus was very close to Lazarus, Mary, and Martha, which doesn't mean he's any less close to us or everybody else, but there was a connection there. And then the story goes on to say, Lazarus come forth, and Lazarus comes out of the grave. And that's the story right there, where we see that Jesus also knows what grief is, knows what comforting is, knows what it means to comfort, and the necessity of being comforted, and knows that he wants to pass on that blessing to his people, those that are going to live God's way, sign up for God's kingdom. There's going to be comfort for those who grieve, for those who mourn. And it may not be right away. At least that's my experience. But that is part of God's kingdom. There is comfort for those who mourn, and they shall be blessed that way. With that, let's put a couple questions up, questions to ponder, to think about, try and connect life to. Number one, have I been treating mourning as something to avoid instead of a place where God may want to meet me? Now, in change, human beings don't like change very much, but in change, there is a chance for things to get reset. A kind of a do-over. It's not a do-over, but the closest thing to a do-over we get as human beings. So, are you treating mourning as something to avoid, put aside, show strength, get on with things, or may God want to meet me here in my grief, in my pain? Is there something God needs to say, share, lead, do? Can I open myself up to God in these moments and let God do his thing? Just a thought, something to ponder. And secondly, I'm backing out here. What does my grief reveal about what I love, value, or long for the most? I think Jesus' grief reveals something about Jesus. What does your grief and what you grieve over, what does that reveal about you? There are people that can suffer certain loss and appear to go, "Eh, you know, who cares? Move on to the next thing." But those who grieve know what it means to lose something because they value something. It's important to them. They're close to it. It's part of their existence. And so, what does your grief reveal about what you love, value, or long for the most? So, that's our blessing tonight. We'll have our blessing in just a second. But first, just want to thank you for hovering, joining, connecting, clicking, coming by. I'm at facebook.com/Stephen Eastwood, youtube.com/@SimpleBible. And you can find all my stuff online at simplepastor.com. And as always, just love your company. This is important to me. I enjoy doing this. This is how I get part of my blessing in life, is by doing this. And so if we can share in that blessing in the middle of the week or whenever it is you're watching, I think that only adds to all of our experience. So thanks for being here. If you could like or subscribe, it always helps the algorithms and the community. I think there's something important about focusing on the Sermon on the Mount as Christians, as groups of Christians, churches, small groups, individuals trying to find our way in this world. I hope that you find something good here. With that, let's go to our blessing based on this. This is how I'm wording it tonight. Blessed are you when your heart is heavy and your tears are real. You are feeling what God feels. May you know the nearness of God in your mourning, the kindness of Christ in your loss, and the sure comfort of the Spirit who holds you now and will never let you go. May God bless you all in whatever your situation.